Hi, I'm Chris Sarandon, and welcome to Cooking by Heart, where we revisit the vivid memories of the food we grew up with.
I couldn't believe the tastes and the flavors.
Lydia Bastianich. Hi, Chris. Susan Sarandon.
And, more importantly, the people and the stories attached to that time in our lives.
You know, I've been dying to chop this up with you for a while now.
Yeah.
And I would do Julia Child. This is a lovely chocolate macadamia nut truffle that has dark chocolate. You can get it in milk chocolate, too. I prefer the dark.
Alice Waters.
I was the one, sort of like mommy dearest.
He'd order one side of the menu and eat that. And then when he was finished eating that, he'd order the other side of the menu and eat all of that. He emptied the kitchen.
Food is the thing. Come on. We know that.
Campaign. My guest today is actress Sachi Parker. The daughter of internationally acclaimed film star Shirley MacClain and the late producer Steve Parker, Parker is an accomplished actress in her own right. She moved to Japan to live with her father at age 2 and spent much of her childhood there. Parker made her film debut in 1985 in the movie Stick, directed by Burt Reynolds, and has appeared in Back to the Future, About Last Night, Peggy Sue Got Married, Scrooge, among many others. And she recently completed All Me, All the Time with Keir Dullea. Parker has guest starred in numerous popular series on television, including television movies. The series Star Trek, Next Generation, Equal Justice, Alien Nation, and Scarecrow and Mrs. King, again, among others. Her theater work has included the Lulu plays, Ladies in Waiting and Pastoral, and at Scotland's Edinburgh Festival, West Side Story, and Moon Children. Staying true to her Japanese roots, Parker has served as the daytime anchor for a Japanese language news program out of New York City. She was recognized for her work as an actress bridging cultural differences between Japan and the United States with the prestigious Kurosawa Award. And in 2008, she appeared as the lead in the acclaimed Japanese film The Witch of the West is Dead as a 75-year-old grandmother, for which she won the Japanese Best Actress Award. She's currently starring in a web series, The So-So You Don't Know, and is co-creator of the upcoming Circuit Cinema series Lights, Camera, Dinner Party, which we will definitely discuss later. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to introduce my guest today, Sachi Parker. Hi, Sachi.
Hi, Chris. So nice to see you again. And hello, everyone.
We start the podcast almost always with, not almost always, we start the podcast with the question, provenance. And your provenance is really quite interesting. So can you tell us, first of all, where you were born and where you ended up, which we talked about briefly in the introduction?
Well, I was born in California, Santa Monica, to be precise.
Mm-hmm.
At 2, I was sent to Japan to live with my father.
Now, your mom, Shirley MacClain, your dad,
Steve Parker.
Steve Parker.
Yeah.
Were they together at the time when you were born and living in LA for a couple of years?
Oh, yeah. They were I say very married. They were emotionally, I think, always very married, but not physically.
Do you recall your first food memory from Japan? Because that would be your first food memory, I would assume.
I love that. I actually do. It was a sea urchin.
Oh.
You know, uni.
Mm-hmm.
Loved it. There's something very comforting about the texture and the taste and then my dad had a beach house, a tiny little thing in Ashina, which is about an hour outside of Tokyo. And we would go there a lot. This is when I got a little older, of course, and I remember, probably kindergarten, 6, 7, right in there.
Mm-hmm.
I loved uni so much that I would go down to the seashore, which was right there, and go sea urchin hunting and get the sea urchin.
Talk about fresh.
Fresh! And, they're prickly, and they're dangerous because you get pricked. And I would take a local little, right there, rock, and put it, and break it open and eat it right then and there.
Wow.
with the seawater, which is salty. So it tasted, oh gosh, it was, now that is really probably my favorite of any kind of food. And it goes with the memory too of being with my dad and, alone with the ocean and sort of self-sufficiently opening the sea urchin.
Talk about fresh. I had a conversation recently with Nancy Silvers, whose father was Phil Silvers.
Oh,
and her mother was from the South. And her mom would make all sorts of Southern food, but she insisted on the kids literally coming to the stove and eating it literally as soon as possible after it was cooked, because she always felt that it was better that way.
Even to this day, I'm like that too. I get very upset because I love to cook, love it. And, if my kids are 28 and 26, for goodness sakes, but if they don't eat it right away, I get very upset.
Yeah. Oh, it's always best. Yeah. Fresh off the stove. I mean, leftovers have their place, but
of course.
Come on, folks.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk a little more generally about life there and the way you were fed, at least in the beginning. The first memory, at least the most vivid one, is of the sea urchin. But what was it like on an everyday basis?
Well, I grew up with my father, who was very into food. And on a daily basis, I would come home from school and it was all about dinner. Mm-hmm. As soon as I walked in the door from school, never mind homework. Homework could just wait. I would be in the kitchen with him, and he's from Germany. By blood, and he grew up there when he was a little boy up until the age of 12, and so sauerbraten and he would get into it for days, and then the last minute he would do some sort of futzing around, and he always wanted me right by his side to taste it. Sach, come over here and try this. And I felt so special and important that he valued my opinion, and I would taste it, and then he was like, "What do you think?" And I think, Dad, it needs some. I would create whatever. I don't know.
Right.
just to please him,
Well, with the imagination of a child, there you go. Yeah.
Exactly. And then he would say, "Oh, what a great idea. All right, well, let's try that." So, I remember one time I said, "It needs cilantro, Dad." And I honestly didn't even know what cilantro really was, but I heard it. And he said, "Oh, and it was good." So anyway, he and I had a wonderful relationship over the stove, and him valuing my opinion. And so I think it started from there. And the other thing my dad did a lot of, he loved nature just like I do, and I got it from him, I'm sure. He would take me on the weekends, not to the beach of the little beach house he had, but different kinds of beaches, on the west coast of Japan, facing Russia and all.
Right.
I remember they're deserted beaches. Nobody's there. And in the middle of winter, and we would go clamming, digging for the clams. And, he would have the pot in the car, and he loved Dom Perignon champagne, and he would have me go get driftwood from the beach, collect a bunch of driftwood. We would light and make a fire, and he would get the pot that he got and get the seawater in it. And we would get the clams and throw them in the pot. And he had the fancy sauce to go with it. And he brought all of it. And we would sit there on the beach and enjoy without a word. We wouldn't even talk. And we would just enjoy the clams right on the beach.
Sachi.
That's what he gave me.
Mm-hmm.
And so to this day, I go camping, by myself, and I fish. And the dogs are with me, so I'm safe.
Mm-hmm.
I still make my fires, and I put the trout, whatever I catch, over the
Right. In a pan.
fires, and I take my fancy, sea salt from Spain or whatever. And I have a great time. Anyway, so that's, my dad really gave me a lot of, of that.
So it occurs to me then, the question, what was your dad doing in Japan?
Oh, he was a film producer, I guess. I don't really know, honestly, because all I know is that his life revolved around food. And even breakfast and making me lunch and the packed lunches for school every day. And
do you remember them?
Oh, the packed lunches?
Yeah.
Yeah. They were either very Japanese, where it was bento bako, which is a lacquer.
Right, box.
Box, exactly.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean. Okay, great. And he would line it with the rice, the Japanese cooked rice, and then he would put the, we would have sometimes oden, which is a marinated fish cakes and, seaweed and all kinds of different things, like a stew.
Yep.
And he would put that on top of the rice and he would make it look very pretty. And then he would maybe put some beautiful ikura, which is it's like a salmon roe, and make it all orange and pretty. Or that would be one thing. Or, whatever we had for dinner the night before, which could have been salmon and whatever. He would put leftover stuff, but make it all pretty. Or it would be a blueberry jam cream cheese sandwich.
Oh,
I mean,
I love cream cheese and jelly. Oh, absolutely. One of my favorites when I was a kid.
Good.
Yeah. Cream cheese and jelly.
Yeah. It was so amazing. And so, he would play around with that, and the kids at school would always wonder what I would come up with at lunch, because we would all look at each other's lunches. What are you having? What are you having? And, it was always different. Sometimes it was bratwurst and, some sauerkraut. Depended.
Were you in a Japanese school?
I was, Chris, up until the age of about 7. And my language was just really Japanese.
Yeah.
I then was transferred into an international school where English and Japanese were the 2 languages. So, English, some subjects were taught, like math was in English and history was in Japanese. So I really learned both then.
And you were communicating with your father in English, I'm assuming?
All English.
Yeah.
Yes.
But when you're off to school, etc., and when you're out in the world, what city were you in?
In Tokyo.
You were in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Okay. So your father cooked almost all the time?
All the time. All the time.
And do you recall conversation around the dinner table?
Oh, yeah. Very detailed conversation. That's what we would talk about mainly while we're eating what
the food
we're talking about.
Yeah.
We had it was an old home, with you know what a kotatsu is?
No.
Okay. In Japan, it's particularly in the winter time. It gets very cold. Like New England, 5 feet of snow and freezing. And no central heating or anything. And, couple of, those stoves that you would carry around.
Yep.
And we would have those. But when we're eating, the Japanese you'd be sitting on the floor and they would dig out like a square hole. And underneath, they would put a electric fire. And then they would put a futon, which is like a eiderdown, but a Japanese version of an eiderdown. Quilt over you so that none of that heated air would escape from underneath. So your feet and your legs were just toasty. And you didn't want to leave, and we would be eating with all that underneath us. And we sat at the dinner table for maybe 2 hours.
Wow.
I mean, a long time.
So unusual. Yeah.
Yeah. A very big deal and then we would discuss what had happened, during the day for him and Mickey, his mistress, whom I did not like at all.
Oh, really? Did she cook?
Yes, but
Your
because
dad
I
was
didn't like her, I didn't like her cooking.
Was she Japanese?
Very Japanese and sort of, I don't know. I think she didn't want me. I think it's the classic stepmother stuff.
Yep.
I was in the way. She just wanted dad for herself, and I was sort of a pain.
And I'm sure the feeling was mutual in terms of wanting her out of the way.
Definitely. But she was always there, and I was like, oh, I would just enjoy this meal so much more if she was.
Did you go out at all?
Oh, yeah. Dad loved to go out. He loved to travel. He was quite the jet setter. And, on vacations, we would go to Greece just to eat moussaka or something. And, and then go right back home to Tokyo. It's just crazy.
Your dad was one of the original foodies.
Totally.
That is somebody who sought food in whatever form and whatever variety. I mean, it sounds like a very kind of eclectic sort of palate.
Very much so. Yes, exactly. He very eccentric. Yeah.
And then at some point, you are off to boarding school.
Yes.
Now, how old? When you were 12? You're at home before that. You're eating at home with dad. You're hanging out. You're going out to eat. When you did go out to eat in Tokyo, you went to Japanese restaurants, yes?
We went to all kinds of restaurants, Japanese. Gosh, French Tokyo, even back in the day there, it was a very sophisticated, they were very into food from all over the world. So there were all kinds of different restaurants. I mean, nothing like it is today.
Right.
But good enough. And he always sought out the best of the best,
Right.
So I learned about food very early on, all kinds of different kinds of foods, and whatever else goes with it, at the restaurants, the manners and the whole thing. Although I remember there was one, I have to tell you, there was one, I still have the photograph, and I don't know where it is. It's in a box somewhere. I was young, I was 6 maybe, and we were he always kept me up till very late. And, those 3-hour, 4-hour dinners, the European way. And I couldn't stay up. And he took a photograph of me. My head was in the soup.
Just keeled right over.
I keeled right over. And he left me there like that, just to sleep.
I hope you finished the soup.
No, I don't think so. I don't know.
So you're there in a pool of soup.
In a pool of soup. My forehead, anyway.
Right. Bon appetit.
Yes, exactly. Thanks a lot.
How much of a shock was it then to be off to boarding school? First of all, to just be off to boarding school, but then the food at boarding school. What was that like?
Chris, I mean, we're talking British, It was in England. It was down in Sussex.
Especially at that time, too. When British food, I've talked about this with a number of guests, because I've filmed a number of things in England, and the change in the cuisine has been stratospheric in terms of how it's changed. Because I remember when I first went there, it was basically bangers and mash and
exactly.
Everything overcooked and not terribly interesting, and a few really kind of okay restaurants. And now the choices are just extraordinary.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Back to boarding school food.
Well, just what you just described, honestly. Brussels sprouts cooked till they're deader than dead. And, greasy bangers and, just fried bread.
Right.
And
for those of you in our audience who don't know what bangers are.
Yes.
Sausages, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, basically encased sausages.
Exactly.
Sometimes in a kind of gravy.
In a kind
of... ersatz gravy, shall we call it?
Oh, let's...
Right.
Exactly. And it was depressing, to be sure, you know. The only thing that I loved there was the English breakfast tea, and I still drink it today because it was the best thing of the day.
Yeah.
They really knew how to, I loved it.
Describe your ideal breakfast tea that you had.
Oh, gosh. Well, you know, just tea. They had just these pots, and you know those warmers, those teapot warmers? Cozies, thank you. We would, you know, I loved the look of them, and it was homey, and then they had, I don't know if it was bone china or not, but it was beautiful. You know, cups were beautiful. It wasn't, you know, so we put the milk in first and then the tea, and it was really, and it woke me up, and just the warmth of it going down inside, you know. And
was there food accompanying it? Oh
yeah, but again,
not so great.
Scrambled eggs and scrambled egg juice soup was like juice. I don't know.
And more bangers and
more bangers.
Yeah, right. More sausage, bacon. You always got bacon too. Yeah,
you know what were really good though? Those half tomatoes. Yeah.
Roasted tomatoes, yes?
Roasted tomatoes. So good.
Yeah. Basically, with any fresh vegetable, and you roast that puppy, you know, roasted beets, roasted broccoli, roasted cauliflower, and you can do any sort of condiment on it or a spice, or, you know, you can put cumin. You can do all kinds of things with roasted vegetables. And they sweeten, and the flavor gets concentrated as they're roasted.
Exactly. And then caramelization on the edges, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Anyway.
Was it boarding school only in Great Britain?
Well, I went to boarding school there initially. It was in Sussex, Bexhill-on-Sea, right on the water, very historic area and all, for 2 years. All girls boarding school. And we, you know, uniforms and the boaters and the whole, those are little hats, you know?
Yeah.
And
straw hats.
Straw hats, exactly. I said to my dad once, I didn't go back home very much. I would stay with different families during the Christmas, Easter, summer vacations. And that was kind of interesting too, you know, because I got a chance to stay with families who lived in France or Germany or Norway or, you know, and they had a program, the school did, of placing the students with the different families for the holidays because it was an international school and a lot of the kids couldn't go home.
Yes.
So that was kind of cool, you know? Every family has a different language, you know what I mean by that? It's like a different, they have a code, like it's their family language code. I don't know, you know. And
we're not talking specifically spoken language as much as there is a dynamic.
An emotional language.
Yeah.
If the father might have been a narcissist or, you know, the wife was under his control or, you know, all kinds of different kinds. That's what I mean by the language, you know, and it really opened my eyes to being very sensitive to different ways of raising, you know, how people did their families, you know, and I always sort of stood out of the, you know, just very in the background.
The observer.
The observer, yeah.
And also a kind of training ground for an acting career too, by the way.
Well, I guess that's...
You know, you stock all that information away, even subliminally. Over time, you know, those people come back in whatever we do as actors.
Exactly. It's so interesting how that, I had no idea, but it's in there, you know?
Yeah.
And
it's also interesting to me, this international and cosmopolitan upbringing of yours, and at the same time being separated from mom. Did you have a long-distance relationship with mom? Did you guys communicate?
Not much, no. I honestly didn't know any other way, you know? And
this was your life.
This was my life, and I, on a daily basis, you know, and I think on some level I missed her because, you know, I would watch these families that I would go stay with during the holidays, and some moms were so
Involved
involved is the word.
Yeah.
Thank you.
on a daily basis.
Thank you. Exactly. So, but it wasn't until I was 12, 13, 14, right in there, later, that I started to, oh, huh. Well, I never had that. I wonder, like I would question it.
Mm-hmm.
And it started to really occur to me, well, where is she?
This is right. By the way, Ma,
Well, where are you?
where the hell are you? Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
And so but it started later.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to miss her.
It sounds like it started when, as with a lot of us, most of us, when we get into our teens and our identity starts to get established. This is who I am. And it's often reflected by our parents, whom our mirrors are. The people that we look to establish our behavior going forward, or how we don't want to behave going forward sometimes.
It's so true. It's exactly. Yeah.
So you're in boarding school through the high school years?
All through the high school years. Yeah, I was in England for 2 years till I was 14.
And then?
I did go back home to Japan, one of the holidays, I don't remember. And I said to my dad, I have this crush on this girl, Sarah. One of those crushes that are just Chris. I mean, she would pass by me and just brush up against me, and I thought I'd die, and I would tell him that. And he, I didn't know anything about lesbianism or anything. You don't know that stuff, especially back in the day. It wasn't talked about much.
It wasn't called that anyway.
It wasn't called anything. Exactly. Yes. But in his mind as an adult, Did
he freak out? Or
did he have and he immediately transferred me to a co-ed boarding school in Switzerland.
Interesting. Here's this guy who has a mistress and is in a marriage, an open marriage, for want of a better word.
Yes.
But if you say, this is something that I'm reacting to, as all kids do in one way or another, we have idols. It can be sexual, but it's not always.
Exactly. So I went to Aiglon, which was up above Lausanne, Canton de Vaud,
in France.
Actually, maybe an hour and a half from Genève. By train, you'd go to Lausanne, and then we would take a bus up to Villars. It's a beautiful ski resort, actually.
Oh, this is Switzerland?
In Switzerland. Yeah. And I loved it. Well, then I discovered boys. I mean, my gosh, Fritz. I mean, wow. I couldn't learn a thing. I was just
gobsmacked.
Boys everywhere.
Yeah.
I couldn't get enough. I was just, And I mean, and it was beautiful there, up in the Alps, and my goodness, and I was into nature. And I would sneak out of my room, there were what, like 10 to 12 girls in a dorm room, I would sneak out down the fire escape.
Yes.
And I would go hiking up in the middle of the night alone to the beautiful lakes and go skinny dipping.
Oh.
And then it was just glorious.
Oh.
And then I would come back and sneak back into bed, I mean, I did love it. I really did. And lots of expeditions, Did
the food improve there?
Well, it did. It was a wonderful change. It was a raclette and, just,
the French influence.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And they served wine, to all of us, kids. Red wine with, at dinner.
Oh, very European.
Very European. And of course, now it would be, I'm sure it doesn't happen anymore. But it's funny. I have a funny thing about that. And I'm wondering about the notion of that now that you call it European, and it is. I wonder, because it was so open and it was celebrated with the the food and the Gruyere cheese and the raclette and the whatever, we were having. And as a result, there was no interest in overdoing it.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Or becoming an alcoholic, so to speak.
Yeah.
It was just part of dinner.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question that alcoholism exists everywhere.
Well, yeah.
But at the same time, the high incidence, and I can't help but think, and I think probably this is where you're going here, is that the incidence, for instance, in college in the United States of binge drinking and, the chugging beers and doing all that stuff is somehow attached to the fact that it was forbidden. Exactly. And that now they're on their own, they can do whatever they want, and I'll just overindulge rather than seeing it as a lubricant.
Exactly.
Social lubricant rather than being something where you just get insensible from it.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going. Thank you. And you said it so much better than I could.
Well, not necessarily.
No, but it's true. I never went to college and I don't know, but I've seen, what happens there. They get crazy,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Nancy Silvers, again, she talked about the fact that on holidays, they were allowed a little bit of wine when they were kids. When I was a kid growing up, my dad always had a glass of wine with dinner, although to my horror now, he would mix water with it because he was not a big drinker, but basically he always had wine with dinner, a glass of red wine. And we were allowed every once in a while. My mom always said to me, I'd rather you do this at home than to see you out in the street somewhere with a bunch of people drunk or smoking on a corner or whatever. I was allowed to smoke at home to my health's detriment, but at the time, there wasn't a knowledge that smoking was so dangerous to your health. My mom smoked through both of her pregnancies, and I like to wonder what my IQ might be like if she hadn't.
I would say, looking at you, let's all smoke. I'm sorry, but you're quite there.
Well, thank you.
I take it back, audience. I didn't mean it.
All right, so we're getting past the boarding school years. After boarding school, you're sort of traveling around. Yes. Yes,
I wanted to always go to college. All my friends who were at school with me all went to. They're from very rich families, and all were required. It wasn't a question. You're going to college. That. And they all did, and they all got into great places and I didn't. I remember going to Las Vegas to see my mom after graduation. I was floundering. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I went to go visit her. On my way back, I figured to Tokyo, and then what? No real colleges in Tokyo for me.
Yeah.
They were mainly in Europe and in the US, and I remember asking her if I could go. And no, you're on your own, you're 17, and that's that. And here's, by the way, a beautiful diamond necklace, and this is yours, and if you need anything, you get stuck, you can sell it. And that was that.
Wow.
And I think to this day, I still feel pain of not having gone.
I just did a live show with Griffin Dunn, and Griffin, who dropped out of college at one point, and who was highly educated, but he basically took it on himself. This is what I need to do now. At some point, I think we all realize that regardless of how we are educated, that we all have some need of curiosity to find out about the world. And that's, through education. And you can either do it through yourself or you can do it, on a more formal basis.
You're so right.
Yeah.
You're so right. And that's where you really do the learning, is out in life.
Yeah. And it sounds like you did a lot of learning in life because you were traveling around. You were a flight attendant at one point?
I was a flight attendant for 7 years for Qantas Airlines.
I love it.
I loved it. It really was lovely. It was still back in the glory days of flying also.
Yeah.
Not the way it is now so much. And I I was lucky enough because I had my languages, which is French and Japanese and English, to always work first class.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was I just loved it. I really did. And I loved traveling and I loved going to different cities and,
Talk about an education.
it really was. Yeah. And I remember going to places like, well, everywhere, whether it was Singapore or Bangkok or Frankfurt or Amsterdam. I don't know. Anywhere I went, back in the day, Qantas anyway, we had long layovers
Mm-hmm.
of,
Because the distances were so extreme.
I think that's
In
probably
the Pacific,
why.
yeah, in the Pacific area, yeah.
Exactly. From Singapore to Bahrain is what, a 15-hour flight,
Mhm.
And so we had to. So I remember places like Singapore where we would just have a 5-day layover or something. I
Yeah.
would just take off by bus into Malaysia. I would take, and it was always a place where Qantas would stop.
Yes.
So every time I went, I would pick up where I left off from the last time, and I would go and see the same family that I'd met, 6 months prior or whatever, and
Oh, how great.
learn how to make Malaysian food and with the mama and the grandma and, and all, and stay with them. And it was really, I loved all that. And then I would always make it back in time for my flight, but
Mm-hmm.
it was always about cooking also. And the same with, anywhere I went. I remember in Amsterdam, we would have, again, 5 days of layover, and I would walk, the herring, the pickled herring, they would just sell it out of buckets,
Mm-hmm.
right by the side of the river. And with all the pickling spices in there still and the oil, and they would wrap it up in newspaper and, hand it to you. And oh my God, there's nothing
Oh.
quite like it.
Oh, street
And
food. Great street food. Yeah.
Oh, street food, stuff like that.
Oh, sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
But somehow you ended up back in LA.
Yeah, I was 25.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided, it was interesting because I would watch a lot of my mom's films on the flights.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, they didn't have what they have now
Yeah, yeah.
with each individual.
Personal screens, right?
They had huge, yeah. And I would watch all kinds, not watch them from beginning to end because you can't, but
Yeah.
every now and then a film of hers would come on, and I would really miss her.
Mm.
And finally, at 25, I said to myself, okay, Sachi, that's it. Go get to know her.
Yeah.
So I did. At 25, I came to LA and I did. And I've been in America ever since.
And was the reconciliation both fruitful from a personal, emotional standpoint and from a food standpoint as well?
Well, yeah.
Does mom cook?
No!
So the polar opposite. Dad was the gourmet cook and mom was the helpless in the kitchen?
Yes, totally. And we were perfectly married, in a way, because I did all of that domestic kind of stuff, and
Right.
I loved doing it, and
Yes.
she loved getting it. And it really was lovely. And she would have, and then she started to have people over. I remember one time she had a dinner party. She decided, okay, Sachi, we're going to have a dinner party. I'm going to invite Robert Redford and Faye Dunaway and over for dinner.
Yeah.
Go make something. Oh, first of all, Robert Redford, I thought I would die. I mean,
I'm sure.
talk about, And I remember I made a very fancy dinner. I had sliced up very thinly this chicken breast, and just maybe 5 seconds in the pan and out. So it's still tender and, and capers and lemon, and the mashed potatoes. And then the very, 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 I was very proud of my food. And they were all there at the dinner table that I had set perfectly. She had all the fancy dinnerware and tablecloths and all. And I was very proper and Japanese and kind of, subservient and
Deferential. Yes.
very deferential. Thank you. And I was going around the table. You know how you do in Europe anyway. You serve, and they take what they want and all. I got sick of it, and I said, with the whole Japanese thing, and I was just in America for the first time. I started serving the mashed potatoes, and in the beginning, I started to serve very gingerly and very elegantly onto the plate in the perfect spot. And it got around to, Robert Redford, and something came over me, and I just got the spoon and I went, I got a part of my mom, and I was like, there you go. Here
Take it. Right. Sit down, eat, shut up.
And that's when I realized, okay, I'm my mom's daughter.
Yeah.
Anyway, a little bit of both. So East meets West, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, how wonderful. That's a great story, by the way.
Robert Redford, it was in the middle of winter, and it doesn't get that cold in LA anyway, but it was chilly. And we were out on her veranda, and I was cold, and he put his little kind of jacket over me, and I was gonna die.
Oh,
I put my arms through the armholes, and I put my hands in the pockets. And honestly, Chris, I gave it back to him afterwards when he was on the way, when he had to go home. I didn't wash my hands for like a week. I mean, I was so starstruck.
Oh, yeah. Understandable.
Oh my God.
It's interesting because I've been around him, and he does have that. It's just this thing, this charisma that's there, that's natural. He doesn't put it on. It's
not at all.
It's who he is. It's an interesting example to me of, we all try to go through life and find out who our actual selves are, who we are. And I just always had the feeling around him that he always knew who he was. Take it or leave it. And that's a great way to be, because you don't have to make apologies to anybody about who you are.
How lovely. I have not reached that.
Well, I'm still working on it too. I'm better at it, but I haven't actually reached it too.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that.
One thing I do want to get into is this new show that you have created with your partner, Joanna Keelock, and it's called Lights, Camera, Dinner Party. And I mentioned on the introduction that it's going to be streaming soon. And my wife, Joanna Gleason, and I happened to be guests on a couple of the episodes, and it was an extraordinary experience. Can you describe exactly what you guys set out to do and what you're doing?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming over that night. It was such a fun time we all had. I mean, I have to say, it was Joanna's idea. Came up with it.
John who's also an actress as
She's a wonderful actress.
Yeah.
Yes. We became fast friends. She called me one day and she said, I had this thought last night in the middle of the night. I woke up and I think the both of us, we love food. We love movies. We love actors and anything to do with movies. And I want to do a show and we should do it together. And so we've been working on this since 2017, slowly. And, we finally are here. And it's a wonderful melding of bringing people from the industry over, whether director, actors, writers, to talk about their experiences. We had you over, we had Keir over, Maya,
Keir DeLay.
Yes.
And his wife, Maya Dillon. And my wife, Joanna Gleason.
And Joanna Gleason.
But talking about specific films, yes?
Yes. And, whichever film they would want to do. And so we create these meals around the film and the decor and the table settings and all. And a dinner party where we would all sit around the dinner party and, talk about the experiences and not only the experiences from on set or, sort of little gossipy things that would happen.
Right.
But also, we're both, Joanna and I, very interested in what made each person become an actor or a director or a writer. Because you are all so famous and so well established, and the stories are amazing, and we wanted, and everybody loves to hear about the personal lives of celebrities, but it's and also cooking, and it's all together with, as we're sitting at the table talking about the time period the movie was made. Stanley Kubrick and how he did that scene where Keir Dullea is falling from the, and back in the day, they didn't have
CGI. Yeah.
Thank you. And so very creative stuff that Keir would go into, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating to both Joanna and I. And
it's sort of a behind the scenes.
Yes.
This is how it was made, but it's also what you guys have done, which I find interesting because this is what my show is about, is how food intersects with so much of our lives.
There you go.
And how the community that's created with food, and in this case, the entertainment community, the film community, and what you guys did so brilliantly, or doing so brilliantly, is to synthesize all that, both visually with the decor, thematically with the food, and it's being apropos to the movie that you're talking about, and the people who were in it. It's conversation. I mean, I always ask people in this show, what was the conversation like? What was the interaction like? What was the emotional connection of the people?
Exactly.
I think you guys have come up with a really wonderful and fascinating kind of show doing that. I can't wait to see it. Any idea when you're going to be up and running and where?
Yeah, it's going to be done probably in the next couple of months. It's all going to get done. They're probably halfway through editing right now. So we'll get it to you right away, and it's going to be on Circuit Cinema. Now, it's a new platform, and they're wonderful people. You guys will be the first, and you and Joanna Gleason. So we're really looking forward to that. But it's wonderful in a way. I feel a connection particularly to the project because it's a way of bringing people, friends, and food together in your home, and which really, we've lost so much of that.
Yes. Just in the culture in general. Yeah. People don't sit down and eat together anymore.
They don't. They're too busy or they're too, nobody talks over dinner anymore.
And what you and your dad did together.
Exactly.
Creating the meal.
That's right.
We try to spend a lot of time with our kids when they were younger. My ex and I did cooking, but also now they do with their children, and we do with the grandchildren as well. It's all just so wonderful.
That's it, Chris. That's it in a nutshell, and if we lose that, wow, we lose each other. What have we got?
And we also lose the memories.
The memories to give our children and then their grandchildren. You really do pass it on. And
exactly.
It's the same with me too, like you. And, I insisted, and it was so difficult in this day and age, to get the kids with all that they have going on, after school activities and this and that and the other thing, to actually, it was an effort.
Sit down.
Man, did I make that effort. And I would light a candle and I would, make it really special.
Good.
And we all sat down and we shared our day. And now my son and my daughter are doing the same. Even my daughter, she's going to Columbia right now. She's in an apartment with 2 other girls. They sit down.
Yeah.
And, they all cook and they sit down at they decide whatever time, they can for even half an hour.
Yeah, that's great.
And so she's created her right now family.
Yeah.
For some, even if it's scrambled eggs, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't matter the quantity, it's the quality.
Yeah.
It's quality of the time. And speaking of memory, because we'll have to conclude at some point here. I could talk to you for hours.
Okay, well, likewise.
We'll do that another time.
Okay.
The last question I always ask my guests is, if you're experiencing something now in terms of food, or you're someplace where you smell an aroma from some restaurant or whatever it is that elicits a memory that takes you back to your childhood, what would that childhood memory be? What was the thing that makes you, I remember this moment so vividly?
Oh my God. Sorry, I'm having a moment because that is such a great question. And I haven't thought about that in years.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, forgive me.
No, that's quite right.
It's in Nikko, which is north of Japan, Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
Every New Year's is a big deal in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
We would go up to the Tokugawa shrine up in the 5-foot snow, but they would carve out a path all the way up the mountain, up to this beautiful temple. And there were vendors up there, street food, but corn. They would have lots of other stuff, octopus. But the corn on the cob, marinated in soy sauce, and I don't know what else, but they would do it over a fire. And the charcoal of the fire, the wood. And oh my God, and it's cold, and the heat. We would all be in kimono because it's proper, because it's New Year's Eve and you pay your respects, and then I would have my corn and it, warm in my hands and in my mouth and going down, Then we would go get a little wish from the temple and we would tie it to a tree until the following year.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And I would be with my dad. And it was a real, wow. Thank you for asking that.
Oh, please. Thank you for remembering it. Because it also brings back, a memory of mine of roasting corn and even doing it today. We do it in the summertime. Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Isn't that amazing?
Soak the corn with the husks on it.
Oh, yeah.
In water, and then put it on a grill and roast it that way. And you can condiment it up however you like. In this case, it was soy sauce. Oh, what a wonderful memory. Thank you. Thank you, Sachi.
Thank you. I realized just now, as an actor, I didn't realize I had that little nugget. I can put it in my little bag.
Sense memory. That's right.
Sense memory. There you go.
And by the way, I'm going to be reaching out to you also for, think about this, a recipe that takes you back.
Oh.
Something that you make now that somehow reminds you of when you were younger.
Oh, awesome.
Think about it.
I will.
We'll talk.
We'll talk. Okay.
And with that, Sachi Parker, thank you so much for joining me on Cooking by Heart.
Thank you, Chris. What a wonderful pleasure it was.
Well,
take care.